Today is Monday, February 6th, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, welcome to the Beer Temple Podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike Schlau from Is Was Brewing, and I'm here with your other co-host, Chris Quinn of the Beer Temple. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well. I messed up Serge's beautiful fade, so he is going to be livid for the rest of the show.
Yeah, he's going to be pissed.
Yeah, but I'm doing well other than that.
Good.
Yeah, we're here at Hop Butcher's.
One of our first off-sites.
Yeah, Hop Butcher Tap Room. We'll get into that in a little bit, but it's cool. Yeah, off-site. We still have producer Serge here.
Yep.
So that's normal. The glue. And I saw Edmar today, so I should thank Lumpen Radio for having us on the airwaves, 105.5 FM, Lumpen Radio, WLPN, and want to thank you guys as well for listening however you listen to, probably via some sort of podcast app.
I think it's mostly terrestrial radio, to be honest.
Yeah, it is probably, just because we don't have any numbers on it. I'm going to assume that it far outweighs the podcasting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, thanks to all you guys for listening and support and the letters and all that sort of stuff. No written letter today, but that was great last week.
It's too bad.
Yeah. Anyway, kind of an exciting show because there's some big news. No.
It's going to be all right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I got engaged.
Yeah, there we go. Hey. Yes.
No, but other than that, it's going to be a reenactment of the Chris Farley, Paul McCartney skit on SNL where he's like, hey, do you remember when you made Pale 31?
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was awesome.
Oh, that's going to be today.
We'll get into that in just a moment. But yeah, so we're going to talk about hops.
That's great.
We're going to kind of get into it. I did say that we are at Hop Butcher, so why don't we introduce our guests? We always introduce them the same way, and that is by order of seniority. Jude, you're the senior guest today. How you doing, man?
Great. That's a first.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's never been the case.
Well, people start working their way, and then they realize they don't want to be on the show anymore, and then somebody else becomes a senior member. No.
I don't care how it happened. It made my night.
There was a time where no one would have been able to catch Edmar, but he's been slacking.
Yeah, he's been slacking. But, yeah, what's up with you, man?
Nothing. It's February. January's great.
Yep.
Cold as shit. February's warmed up a little bit more.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
almost immediately.
Yeah. It's the, I don't know, it's like the season of love. We got Valentine's Day coming up. It's still great weather for Happy Brews.
Always great weather for
Yeah,
Happy
getting
Brews.
closer to summer. We haven't been, we closed on this location in December of 22. Excuse me, it was December of 21. So at this time, we were still turning this place around, coming over here to shovel outside. Still a lot of work to be done. So it's bringing back some memories of what this place was like a year ago. We still weren't open. So it feels good to be, pretty much a year away from that time, and we are open. So
Yeah.
we're here doing a podcast.
Very cool. Yeah, which is something that we've been talking about doing for a long time. So finally, not quite the way we were thinking of doing, and I think other people were also going to be here.
We have more darts leagues taking over the place.
Yes, there might be a darts league, taking it over today.
I didn't expect an early morning text to say, oh,
Yes.
it's like, okay, we can do this. It's great.
Yeah.
It feels like my dad used to take me to when the score, before like ESPN 1000 was a thing around here, but when the score, like sports radio in the morning was a thing. And you used to go out to, a bar, and you're only a kid, but you're going with your pops, and you're grabbing beers, and you're eating wings, and they're doing the live remote. It feels like a Boris and Bernstein type thing. It's great.
Yeah, we're now a mobile podcast, so if you have a tap room, we'll come to it. and we'll record.
Well, I realized that. Yeah, I realized that I needed to send no, we will definitely not do that.
We're just missing the person that hypes up the crowd.
Right.
That does this.
Exactly. Right. And
Serge, can you hype the crowd, please?
Yeah, Serge is great. He's a great hype man. Yeah, because he just says no. But yeah, I was. I met Mike and his fiance now at Hopley afterwards, but I was kind of sure of what time to go, but I didn't want to. But I wasn't quite 100% sure.
About yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday. Yeah. And I can't text you because what if something catastrophic had happened?
Sure.
Yeah. So I needed to put in some total BS thing about the show today. I think I texted you everything's good for tomorrow, just to make so you would maybe see it and be like, oh, am I going to see you at 6 p.m.? I'm like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, what I was thinking of the day I was proposing to my girlfriend was I should make sure Chris knows what time to show up.
I should retell him.
Even though I told him, yeah.
Yeah, you and I told him. No, I knew that.
This
so
very cryptic text, I should probably clarify what time I should.
Yeah, so I asked Serge because I figured Serge would know. Yeah. And he did.
Serge is the one who actually told my dad that I was going to propose.
Yeah,
I told them I was planning. I didn't tell them when. And then Serge was emailing with my dad about a book, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to go see Mike on Sunday for his engagement party."
Got a lot of. You can tell your old man that we got a lot of positive feedback for his appearance on the show.
He's good. He's good. He's an avid listener. Listens to every episode, and then asks me what were you talking about?
Well, at least one of our parents has listened to at least a single show.
Should have texted, "Did you propose?" And hope it didn't go through.
All right. Well, we have one more guest. First-time guest. First-time guests always introduce themselves. But thank you, Jude, before I move on, for coming on and for making the space available. So thank you very much. Our next guest is Mr. Matt Brynildson of Firestone Walker. What's up, Matt? Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hey, guys. Yeah, this is Matt Brynildson, and I'm talking to you remote from my office at the Firestone Walker Brewing Company here in beautiful Paso Robles, California. And if you don't know where Paso is, it's kind of equidistant between San Francisco and LA on the Highway 1 or 101 corridor. So we call it Central Coastal California. And, California is kind of a big state, 40 million plus inhabitants, and it takes an awful long time to drive end to end. So we're kind of right in the middle.
Awesome. And you've kind of have a Chicago past as well, right? I mean, a long and storied Chicago past. Would you mind just going through the places in Chicago that or maybe just let's go Midwest. Let's do all the Midwest. Let's make it really difficult for you. Yeah.
Going way back.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I mean, if I drink a couple beers, you'll hear my Midwest accent come out a little bit. I was born and raised in Minnesota, and did my college years in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and that's definitely where the beer bug bit me. It's all Larry's fault.
Okay,
drinking Bell's beers, kind of way back in the day. Was home brewing, and in fact I had the great honor of having I wouldn't, he would probably not have considered himself a mentor, but I thought he was a mentor. Rob Scala was at Bell's at the time, the guy who came up with Two Hearted and was the innovation brewer back in those days. So he was a big influence on me in those days. But anyway, getting to Chicago, so I feel like just about everybody who graduates from college in Michigan, their path somehow goes through Chicago. It was like most of my classmates at Kalamazoo College ended up landing their first jobs in the Chicagoland area. And in fact, I took advantage of that. And I was a little bit of a late bloomer. I actually picked up a job in Kalamazoo at Kalamazoo Spice Extraction Company, Calsec. And in the beer world, they're known for hop extracts. And back when I was there, it was a lot of downstream products. It was Tetra and Hexa and, basically light stable hop extracts, which also are really good for foam. So there is an application for those things in craft beer. But anyway, so I stayed back after I graduated a couple years and worked at Calsec, and Calsec's who put me through the Siebel Institute. So
got it.
Really my first, stay of any length was attending classes at Siebel.
But you had already had the craft bug had already bit you at that point before you started at the, what is it, Calsec? What's it called?
Yeah, Calsec, exactly.
Calsec, yeah.
No, I mean, I started homebrewing, and that was the thing. And Bell's had a nice homebrew shop, so you could buy your gear and your grain there. And then, if you're a beer dork like me, you're bringing bottles down to the brewery and asking brewers to taste them and give you feedback. And that's where Rob Scala, who I mentioned, kind of came in. And he was the first one to take me to the great taste of the Midwest, and showed me kind of commercial scale brewing. At that time, I think it was a 15 barrel kit, so it wasn't that big. But anyway, I spent some time at Siebel. And while I was at Siebel, Greg Hall was putting the Fulton Street production facility together. So Goose was just the Clybourne operation, but they were building out the Fulton Street plant. And so they were soliciting for Siebel grad applicants for the production brewing facility. And I applied, and I think he offered me like $9 an hour. And my parents were like, "You got a college education, you can't go make beer for $9." That whole story. And then somehow, some way, I eventually made my way in there. So in and around 95, 96, I started at Goose Island, Fulton as an entry level brewer. And kind of the rest is history. I lived in Chicagoland for about 5 years.
Okay.
And I was living in kind of Bucktown Wicker Park area, so it was a short bike ride and down to the Fulton Street plant. It was a little harrowing, dangerous bike ride in those days.
Yeah, not so much anymore.
Yeah. So that's the short story.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Chicago. Yeah.
And I guess before we went on air, we were talking a little bit. I mean, I got to brew with and met a lot of the Chicago brew ranks back then. We were talking about Jim Seebeck, James, and he and I made beer together for a while there at Goose. Greg Brown, who you probably know from the area, was brewing there when I first started. Josh Deeth came along. And then maybe he's kind of outside the Chicagoland area now is Finn DeMink from Southern Tier. He was my homebrew partner back in Kalamazoo, became a brewer at Goose Island, and then later became the owner of Southern Tier Brewing Company. And I mean, you could just, you got to roll out a list of folks who came through Goose. You probably know a lot of them.
Chocolate is Chris Quinn's favorite beer of all time.
You're more creme brulee, man.
Creme brulee, no.
We have talked about how they were probably the forefathers of the pastry stuff.
I do. I put it down. I think they were the forefathers.
Went east and did that stuff, and I went west and made hoppy beer. So
that's cool.
Good choice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to come on here. Let's quickly go around. We always, I'll let you go last, Matt, so you can think, because I didn't even send an outline, because I could already tell when we got on beforehand that Matt would fit right in, because he's like, I didn't really take a look too close. I was like, perfect. You're on the right show. But we're gonna just talk about a beer that we've had lately that was stood out to us for one reason or another, or a beer that we're anticipating or looking forward to having. So. You want to go, Mike? You got
sure. So I made a beer for my girlfriend, now fiance, as part of the proposal and party and stuff. When we first started dating, she had blue hair and told me that her friends decided I should make her a beer. That should be a saison brewed with ginger called Blue Haired Gal, because she's a little spicy. I was like, you're not that spicy. But so 3.5 years later, I finally made it, and it's a pale saison that was conditioned with Brettanomyces on, I think it's ended up being about 8 pounds of ginger.
Wow.
It's a lot of ginger for like a barrel of beer. But it's like the super floral nose, little bit of Brett character, touch of acidity, and nice little spice on it. Nice. But we were all drinking it at the party yesterday at Hopleaf.
I've got two for me that were both. I mean, I can cheat because they were both on draft, but it's not going to be off black for once for the past 2 weeks. I think that's been what I've been talking about. But we got the Conistons, not the Bluebird, but the XB on draft. I don't know the last time I've had that on draft, but we had just got it in, super fresh. It's their original. It's Connison's original bitter, and it's just drinking really, really nice. It's just great when you can get a nice, fresh example of just a well-made bitter. The good thing is that there's more and more being made locally, but we have a ways to go. And it's pretty awesome. I mean, just drinkable, crushable.
Was it the first beer you said, if you guys don't come here, we're all going to drink it, or was that the second?
That
beer
was Ridgeway.
That replaced?
That was the Ridgeway IPA, which was
Ridgeway was the first one.
Yes,
you guys
this replaced it. Oh, we destroyed it. It was awesome.
I had at least 2 of them last week.
It was great. It sucked you in. Like the first half, you're like, oh, this is a good beer, and then by the second half, you're just like, okay, this is what I'm drinking tonight. And then from August Shell, they have a Union Lager. It's called. I think it's a Dortmunder. We don't put on a lot of Shell stuff. We don't have the opportunity to. Amazing. Who would have thought? Guess what? They know how to brew beer.
Good lager.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So those are 2 that I've had that just kind of stood out to me, and I was really, really enjoying. 2 kind of session beers.
And you still have the one on now, right?
We have both of those on now. Yeah. They're
Right
good.
on.
How about you, Jude? What's up?
I think I got 2.
Oh, 2 again. Okay.
I got 2. I think when the calendar flips and it's the first week of January, I have this like Pavlov's dog salivation for Hop Slam, because usually they'll bottle it or can it on the 6th of January, and then it's here on the 12th of January.
We're always right around Super Bowl time. That's how I time it.
And typically Super Bowls involve getting those little kegs of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go after it on Super Bowl. We've finished.
Who do you got this year? This is a very important question.
The Philadelphia Eagles.
Thank you.
Go Birds.
Thank you.
That's Chris's favorite. For everybody that doesn't know.
Yeah. I think people who listen to the show know my background.
No,
yes.
So first off, those little kegs that they do every year is great. But anyways, that's the coolest thing living so close to Michigan.
Yeah.
Is that they'll package it and we'll get it. But this year they did it in October.
Yes.
Kind of mess with things.
I know.
Yeah. So I was looking around. So once 2023 hits, I'm looking around like, who's got Hop Slam? Is there fresh Hop Slam? And my dad came over for the what's it called, the conference championship.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, "Hey, I got some Hop Slam," and I was like, "Did you check the dates on that?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, they came out in October this year. And I'm like, you know what? It's probably fine. I'm like, if
does your dad even know that that's a thing to worry about?
He knows
that's
that.
cool.
Oh yeah, he knows that. Although he keeps a lot of beer warm, he doesn't seem to care. He'll come to beers of ours a year later.
Die hard.
Yeah. But if there's any brewery where you're going to get 2-month, 3, 4-month-old beer, hoppy beer that's still good, it's going to be Bell's, right?
Yeah.
I said, Dad, I'm sure that
Or
beer.
Firestone Walker.
Right. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So I said, just bring it over, and
Kiss
then
ass.
the coolest thing too about Chicago winters is that you don't have to keep beer in the fridge. You just keep it outside.
Yeah.
So you put
Nature's
it outside.
fridge.
Yeah. And
It doesn't freeze?
it was. It does. It
Not
does.
if you drink it fast enough.
Yeah, you just have to keep it out there for about a half an hour. You can't let it go too long.
Maybe in the garage.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it'll freeze in the garage. So you just have to have a timer. You have to be very aware.
Is your pacing correct?
Yeah.
And we finished a 6-pack of it amongst my wife, my dad, and myself.
having a good old
and
time.
It was tasting. We were celebrating your Eagles win, and it
Go
was
Birds.
tasting so good. It was just like fresh Hop Slam, and I think that beer is fine with age on it. But the last. So last year, this is my second beer. Last year, I think they released it for the first time, and it came around again. Sierra Nevada's Powdered Day. Is to me is just a nice winter hoppy brew. I think it's got like Amarillo, Comet, Idaho 7, Citra, Mosaic. I think that's it. Chinook, and it's just a nice gold color. I think 7%, 7.5%.
It's a sweet spot.
Delicious brew.
That is a sweet spot.
Sweet spot for
Delicious
IPAs.
brew.
Yeah.
Great
Sweet.
IPA. It's like it toes the line between like being like a what Three Floyds tasted to you like when you were drinking Three Floyds in 2012 and modern IPA.
Got
the
it.
best of both
Ooh,
worlds. It was
all
great.
right, well,
It was great.
I'm a fan of that.
Sounds great.
Yeah. All right, Matt, you're up. Anything you've had lately or you're looking forward to having?
Yeah, I mean, Can I have 3?
Whoa.
Absolutely.
Wow. You got to one-up us. Okay.
Well, only that.
Jeez.
We're just building momentum here.
I'm drinking a beer that we just released, and it's a Pilsner beer that we made with Urban Roots. So Peter Hoey is a close friend. I'm not sure if you've been exposed to Urban Roots beers, but he's kind of a rare case in California where he's making more lager beer than he is ale, and he makes amazing IPAs as well. And we collaborated on a Pilsner, and I'm sure you guys would feel the same when you do a collab. It's always nice to let the brewery you're working with really have a say in the recipes, with that idea that you're going to learn something new and not just take, one of your boilerplate recipes and pump in a couple new hops and call it a collab. And so we let Peter come in and really brew a Pilsner completely different than we would do it. Pivo is kind of famous for its late hopping. And so, it takes a few, would be maybe considered, almost like pale ale or IPA concepts in late hopping. In other words, we're adding some Whirlpool hops and a judicious amount of dry hop there, although it's noble hops. Where Peter, it's like he doesn't add anything after 30 minutes before the end of boil. So we ended up making this Pilsner that's really classic, doesn't have any dry hop character. We use Hersbrucker and Tettnanger. And it's really assertively bitter. It's 40 plus IBUs and just drinks like a really nice North German
Pils. Sweet, like
that's
a Jaeger.
Fluffhead.
Yeah.
So now I'm gonna have to send you guys some.
Oh, heck yeah.
Please do. That's Fluffhead. Is that what you were holding up?
Yeah. Fluffhead. We both like fish. I mean, I'm sorry if you don't like that band. We're both fish fans, so we had to do it.
Nice.
Okay. But it's interesting, and it's like I was mentioning earlier, California is such a big state, but there's so many good up and coming IPA brewers. And one brewer that I'm really excited to get to know their beers better is North Park out of San Diego. And although I've had a chance to taste one or two of the beers, I'm not so sure I've had a chance to really taste them after understanding some of their kind of unique hopping techniques. And I don't know if we're going to get that geeky on this show or not, but they're using some really interesting combination of kind of new technology hop products in some pretty classic West Coast IPAs. So I'm kind of dying to get down there and sit a session and taste through those beers.
Nice.
That'll be worth the trip.
I'm going there next month. So I literally just wrote it down. I literally wrote North Park.
Yeah.
And they just opened up a second location too.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. And then the third beer I was going to mention, because you mentioned Saison, and it got me thinking that at least once or twice a year we put a Saison in, and we've been really trying to work on, kind of mixed culture Saison a little bit, and not so much on the front end, but, picking a really, sturdy Saison yeast that's really attenuative on the front end, diastaticus or other, doesn't matter. And then, but finishing it with Brett. And so we're going to take a swing at it this year with Omegang. They're going to come out. We're going to brew Hennepin on our 10 hectoliter system, maybe a couple turns, transfer it to Barrel Works, which is our kind of sour beer production facility, and do the, Brett finishing and bottle conditioning there. And we've been talking a lot about how we're going to make that beer. So I'm really excited about that one coming up.
That's awesome. That's basically everything my brewery does, is primary fermentation with Sack, Saison yeast, and then a lot of bottle conditioning with different strains of Brett.
All right. Well, now your brewery's on my list.
Oh boy. I'll send you some of my beer if you send me some of that beer.
Perfect.
Yeah.
There you go.
Matt, North Park's red. We met Kelsey a couple times. There was this back in the day. Sam Calgione had this like Discovery Channel series, right? I think it was called like Brewmasters.
Like yeah.
So when we were first getting into beer, like in like 2009 or 10, we'd watch this all the time, and then years later, my wife and I were wondering, like, how can we watch that again? And they have it on Amazon. So then once you rent that and you run through the episodes, they'll recommend the next thing to watch. And there's a couple, I think there's like a brewery, there's a couple brewers who like in San Diego who do a show where they go from brewery to brewery. And at the time they had gone to North Park, this brewery that I hadn't heard of called North Park, as they were building their facility in San Diego or North Park. And then years later, they popped on the radar again, and I think they won a medal for like Hop Fu, and it's like, wait a minute, that looks like the guy that we watched in that. The series, was hi-fi, but it also had a lo-fi quality to it. They were just going around and putting a mic in your face. And then, it's like, oh, I know that brewery. They do some really cool things. He said something like, and it applies to the show, but, Incognito, a Haas product, which is like a flowable, aroma extract and flavor extract that they say to add to the whirlpool. But what he does is he said when he was spraying out his whirlpool, he noticed how much Incognito was still in the kettle or in the whirlpool vessel. So that he said what he would do is he would knock out, or before he knocked out, he would knock out a barrel of hot wort into the fermenter and then put the Incognito in, then switch so that it can all stay in the fermenter and then cool in the rest, so that it's all there on day one and it's not in this whirlpool vessel.
Sure, you're not washing it out at the end, right?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that's like their house flavor now is Citra Incognito all the time.
Yeah, so I'm all excited to taste those beers in person and get to know how he does that. And and you, it sounds like you know better than I, but I think the story goes that he was just crushing it as a home brewer in competition and started doing the same as a quote unquote professional or commercial brewer. And so that's what really excites me about being out here. There's just there's a lot of breweries, but there's a lot of really good brewers coming up. It's hard to keep track.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, and it's a great segue. Thanks, Jude. Somebody did read the outline, perhaps. That was a perfect segue because I figured with Matt on and you, Jude, it would only make sense to kind of just dive into. We did the state of styles before. Why don't we do the state of hops right now? Because I still think that's where U.S. craft beer is going to be for the foreseeable future.
Forever.
Probably forever. Certainly could be. You're banking on it based on the name of your brewery. I would say.
No, I'm just making it based on my love of beer style and IPA being
Yeah, exactly. So, one of the things that I was, I don't want to be too specific to. All right, I'm going to change it up a little bit on the fly. So, you were saying that this North Park brewery is kind of taking some the techniques that were working for them or for him in home brewing and just kind of moving it on to commercial scale. Mike, at Pipeworks, I think you guys were probably doing a lot of the same stuff. I think there's a history of
pro-am, or professional amateurs.
Right, but I think there's a history of maybe, I don't know if it's accurate to say doing not knowing that you're not supposed to do it and then it working and being successful.
Ignorance.
Right, but successful
ignorance.
Yeah,
and not having it on your radar that you were scared to not do what you did as an amateur, and not going to have that block and just say I'm just going to continue doing it this way, but on bigger equipment.
Yeah. So is that where you guys see a lot of the progress being made in hops? And let me take a step back because I've seen the growth of craft beer and styles always tied to either new hops, new hop products, new techniques, new hop-based styles, and we can go on forever. But most recently, I guess cold IPA might be one of the most recent. Before that, hazy is still just exploding, maybe dying down a little bit. And I don't know. I'm pretty sure that the next big thing is going to be hop focused. But is it going to be something that's going to? Do you guys think it's going to be a an incremental kind of technique, or it's no way to potentially know, but
it's a great question.
What you take it then, Mike?
I don't know. Where do you see the next phase of hop growth? Is not just new varietals, but techniques and products, and what is the new thing that people are going to unlock that's going to change the way we drink hoppy beer?
Yeah, that.
Well, I think in that case, though, like with Kelsey from North Park, he didn't have, Incognito, I think, is only, maybe been available commercially for 2 years. So I think he had that as a home brewer, but I think, like, in his case and a lot of people's case, whether it's a home brewer or it's a professional brewer, is I think, he put in and people put in the work and are curious about results and trying things, time and time again, but, taking things that they already learned or things that they learn along the way. And as these new products, become available, kind of seeing the light and say, hey, there's a lot of products I feel that come out and the suppliers will say, this is how you should use it. But then I think you see a lot of brewers say, well, if I follow like the math or I follow the science, we can also probably use it like that. And then that's how they kind of hop on the next thing that kind of I don't want to say becomes in vogue, but that they find that they like, or a lot of it is probably brewing your beer and tasting your beer and saying how you want to make it different, and then you know how to get there. And then before you know it, you try your new thing and say that was kind of like the missing part. This is the way that we like to do it. And then in that example, now this is our house flavor.
Yeah, and I would add that, I think the interesting thing that's happening right now is if you rolled the clocks back a decade or more, back to my CalSec days, all of the new product development was aimed at the big brewers. So it was aimed at how industrial brewers made their beer and the types of systems they had available, and also the styles of beer they made. Now suddenly, like the largest consumer of hops in the world is U.S. craft, and breweries around the world are emulating U.S. craft. So now suddenly the science and the money is now driven towards selling those products specifically to us for the types of beers we're making. And at the exact same time, you're getting, this is my opinion, and I mean, maybe you agree with me, like the confluence of the legalization of marijuana, and there's a lot of money there, and there's been a lot of really interesting extract technology that's been coming out of that industry. And now there's some capacity to apply that to hops. So, to try to answer your question, I think that there's this really cool time when we have, great varieties that have really innovative flavors, brewers who are willing to try new products, and some scientists who are coming up with some really interesting products focused directly on the craft industry. And, you mentioned Incognito, and I'm sure that, flowable hop products, they've been around for decades, but suddenly now someone's like, variety specific, or with really booming hop flavor of new cultivars like Mosaic or something like that in mind. So, there's always the scientists back in the lab working on this stuff, but they got to find brewers to use it and then, apply it in a way that it works. And it's all coming together right now. It's really cool. And I mean, even just concentrated pellets, T45s have been around forever, but all of a sudden through cryo's marketing and maybe some little adjustments to the process, you've got a lot of brewers who are finding, that those work really well for them. There's some yield advantages and maybe some flavor advantages. I'm not sure, Jude, if you're using a lot of cryo or concentrated pellets in your process right now.
Yeah, we use a lot of cryo. Mostly every beer that we brew, we always make sure that like let's 10-20% of the dry hops got some cryo in it.
Can you explain why you like to do that?
Well, so originally cryo was in a powder form that we'd go up to the top. You like take a ladder up like a 30-barrel fermenter or 15-barrel fermenter and dump the powder at the top, and it would just sit. And you're like, oh, maybe I'll throw pellets on top of it, so it drops to the bottom. And then they developed like a kind of like a pellet, like a T90, where you could use it just like you would a traditional T90, like dry hop. And I think like the two reasons we like to do it is there's less vegetative matter in it, and it packs more of a punch, so you save on some beer. But also too is like we will hand select a lot of our hops, so that it's a certain type of character. But then there's some consistency as well in the cryo and feel. It kind of presents like a full spectrum of what that hop character would be like. But instead of throwing like 44, 55 pounds of T90s and have all of that load into the beer, we could just do like 22 pounds of that cryo and get just as much character.
So a lot of it's like a yield.
Yeah. Well, I feel it's like it's smoother. It's yield. It takes up less room in your cooler. I feel it could lead to a smoother flavor. You have less vegetative matter in your beer. I think you have a cleaner beer that way. So I think we do it. The beer is ready to go sooner. And it presents kind of like a full spectrum of that specific hop character.
As someone who doesn't use a lot of cryo like that, is it just a more concentrated but same percentages of each oil and compound, or does the cryo process actually change the presentation of that, like those hops? So is it still just concentrated Citra, or is it slightly different because of the processing?
Matt, I feel you could speak to this better.
Yeah, I mean, so for a long time, concentrated pellets, they're always referred to as T45. If you go back to, we were talking about T90, essentially means that about 90% of the original hop leaf material makes it into this finished pellet usable for the brewer. And we call that a whole hop pellet. And T90 is just the terminology that's always been used around that. T45 was concentrated to have about 45% of the original hop material. And through the process of cooling the hops, hardening the lupulin glands, and doing some separation, they're selecting away from vegetative matter, basically stripping away vegetative matter and concentrating the lupulin. And those pellets were referred to as T45, or sometimes in Germany, a lot of the contracts that brewers sign with growers or brokers are for kilograms alpha. So, essentially at the end of the day, they're buying alpha acids, not pounds of hops. So brokers would naturally use the T45 process to concentrate or get to a standardized alpha level, because that's what the brewers asked for. They're like, I want you to deliver 6% alpha to my, brewery, whether you harvested that or not. That's what I want to use in my brewery. What's so cool about cryo is that they've tuned up that process such that it's really aimed at not just concentrating the alpha acids or the bittering potential, but also making sure they carry forward all the, flavor active compounds, terpenes, volatile oils, all the things that we want for our IPAs, right, to make these really expressive IPAs. So if the process goes well, and as Jude said, you selected the best hops, if it goes through this cryo process, hopefully you've just concentrated up all the good stuff that you want, and you've stripped away this vegetative matter, the polyphenols, the kind of things that, especially when you're dry hopping, I don't know what it's a large dry hop for you guys. In our brewery, it's like anything over about 2.5, 3 pounds is pretty high, and then I talk to other brewers who are like, oh yeah, 6 pounds, 8 pounds. But as you can imagine, the more hop material you throw at the beer, the more vegetative material, and the more prone you are to carry this kind of harsh, chlorophyllc polyphenol bite. And I think so. In my experience, like cryo allows you to pack a little more aromatic punch without bringing so much of the harshness from the plant material to the finished beer.
So it sounds like the way that the general trend is going for now, anyway, is towards kind of existing cultivars of hops that are getting different treatments that might make some financial sense. They might be yield. Hopefully, they have a little bit of a cleaner, but it's kind of like just kind of maybe shaping and molding and just incrementally improving the existing hop products. Is that kind of what, and it's very like kind of technology based versus Citra came onto the scene and everyone had their Citra beer. I mean, I remember the first time I had a Citra beer, and first time I knew it was a Citra beer, I was like, what the hell is this? Yeah, I mean, it was probably like Zombie Dust, Cenotaph, and I remember I was with John Laffler, another former Goose Island brewer, and we both just kind of looked at each other and were like, how does Three Floyds keep reinventing a style, the pale ale, that we seem seemed like could not like progress any further, and we're like, they did it again. This is amazing. Do you see that there like? Is there still potential for something else out there that just has like such a instead of like a XY axis, it's off on its own axis in a completely different direction? Or is it going to be kind of massaging what we have now with technology to make it, more affordable or slightly cleaner, stuff like that?
Well, I mean, I think we're always looking to develop flavor and land on flavors that we haven't experienced before. And for a while, it could have just been all just straight Citra. And then now, we have Citra Cryo. So now we could present, a drinker and ourselves with a beer that's part of its character is Citra and part of its character is Citra Cryo. And then that produces flavors that you haven't experienced before. And then before you know it, you've got another way that you can get Citra into the mix. So not only have you layered in Citra T90s and you've layered in Citra Cryo, but now you've got a layer of Citra Incognito in there. And then, then there's a new hop product. So now it's like, first it just started with a beer that was just Citra, and that was great for a long time. But now I could present to you something that you haven't experienced before that maybe just continues to push flavor in that direction. And that's what's great about all these hop products that are coming out. It's just like you always have the ability to taste something you've never tasted before. Mm-hmm. Personally, I think that's what we're always trying to create is it's cool if we could produce something that is great and characterful and tastes like standard IPA. And we're also really excited if, based on our ingredient selection and the tools available to us, that we land in territory that we haven't experienced before.
Right, and that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think we're always just trying to create very specific experiences at the moment. And if for this one beer that exists at this one time in this month, we could present beer in a way that you haven't experienced, then that's the goal.
Sure, and it doesn't need to be the literal flavor of that hop. It doesn't need to be that this one tastes like schnozberries or whatever. Right. But
and that you were never able to taste that beer like that because those products were not available.
Yeah, they didn't exist.
Yeah, and I find this really fascinating. So I just got back from the hop conference. It was up in Santa Rosa. So Vinny and Natalie Russian River were kind of the host brewery for the Hop Growers Convention. And Vinny gave a couple of talks, and he mentioned very openly that if you think about it, like Blind Pig and Pliny are decades old recipes. I mean, I think he was brewing Blind Pig back in the early 90s, and that beer still sells well. It's kind of like Two Hearted selling so well now after being around for so long. Mm-hmm. And he said it's like, it's not that we just had a set recipe and we're brewing the exact same beer that we were then. We're using all of the new innovations and technology to reinterpret that beer for a modern audience. And he admitted as much that, a large portion of the dry hop is now cryo because that's just delivering exactly what IPA drinkers are wanting. And it's also, paying dividends back at the brewery in terms of yield and all these other things. And he talked about other adjustments he was making and the malt bill and things like that. So it's not just about the innovation and creation of new styles, but it's keeping our existing portfolios tuned up, relevant, and maybe in some cases also, economically more viable because nothing sucks more than like hitting a beer with 4 or 5 pounds per barrel and realizing 30% losses.
Right.
That's just money down the drain, quite literally. And that's some of these products just bring some kind of economic gain. And then, you taste them and you're like, whoa, okay. Yeah, they're even cleaner and better tasting than the original recipes. So yeah. And why is it happening so rapidly now? I think, finally, all these different groups are talking together. The brokers have realized that there's this kind of insatiable demand by craft brewers for new varieties and new products. They've engaged with scientists that are really focused on the craft industry. And you have this dynamic relationship where, people are trying all these new things and building new beers with them where, mm-hmm. 20 years ago, you probably had a German brewmaster at the helm of, industrial brewer X, Y, or Z who was like, nah, it's non-Reinheitsgebot. We're not doing that. Right. And that's not how we make beer, and just kind of shutting down those new innovations before they ever got legs.
That's awesome. That's awesome that the craft, I mean, I think I had heard that, but it's nice to be reminded that the craft beer scene is the primary driver of hop R&D at this point, which is great.
And the major consumer of hops, period.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the craft brewing industry transformed what was a struggling hop industry in the Pacific Northwest, because big brewers were driving a lot of those farms right into the dirt without, not paying good prices for hops, continually using CO2 extracts to the detriment of both their beers and to the hop growers because they were buying fewer hops. And it was the craft brew industry that really was breathing new life into that, that part of our brewing, important part of our brewing raw material supply chain.
And man, I got to give you credit too, because I see you do it. I see like when you're driving around, you say we stopped at Green Cheek, and we tried all their beers and we're running through it and they're making some rad IPAs, or, sometimes I feel like you guys will like be ending the day and you'll have a bunch of California IPAs and you're going through. And I think what we've seen more than ever, and I think too from the people who are making the smallest amount of beers is, we started with advanced hop products that maybe the biggest of the biggest breweries were using, and it was all aimed at alpha. It was bitterness and foam and light struck and all that type of stuff. And then you started to see, flavor and aroma. And for those who are interested in pushing flavor and aroma and seeing, people of brewers of all sizes come together and be willing to share that information and how they do things, all with the goal of just being, we want to make the best beer possible. And I feel like we all then kind of take from each other and we all help each other out and we try to get there. And now you've seen, like, whether it's the Incognitos or the Spectrums, or, now we're able to vacuum distill hops into oils, and we're able to top up beers with oils. And now, like Matt, like you said, with cannabis, and now we're taking the same things and we're able to start dousing our beers and start hitting up on all these monoterpene alcohols and just phthals and all this crazy stuff. And before you know it, it's like, how did we get here? And I think some of it, what's really cool is your guys' willingness to be like, we're a badass brewery, we're making great beer, and these little guys over here that are making 1,000 barrels a year are making kick-ass beer, and we're going to go hang out and make a kick-ass beer too. And then us just kind of coming up and just being like, we're into all this stuff too. We never even thought about using hop extracts, but we're going to use them because we know they make some kick-ass flavor. And I think that's why right now I think the craft brewery stance in terms of like the camaraderie is great when it comes to like this interest in all these groups of brewers, being able to develop flavor.
Which is cool, which has always been a big part of craft beer.
Yeah.
I mean, just the...
Yeah, I mean, coming off of that...
I always feel blessed when the new kids on the block want to talk to this old timer.
No.
Yeah,
well,
right?
I'll never forget. I don't know if it was Stan's book or if Mitch Steele's book, but like there was a chapter where it was like Matt Brynildson and Firestone Walker, Vinny Slursa, they try up at 2 pounds per barrel, and this is like 2014 or 13. We're like, all right, we got to do 2 pounds per barrel.
Right.
We got to do this.
They said so.
Like we let it rest for 2 days or 3 days, and then we crash. But no, come on now.
That's awesome.
Well, off of that, I have like a philosophical question, I guess. When you exist in like at Firestone Walker, it's such like a, metaphorically a high altitude. You're making a lot of beer, and you have some iconic beers that keep the lights on, or whatever you want to call it, the 805s, the Mind Hazes. How do you both do the innovative thing and keep the consistency of your core brands while improving them? Like, what is at the center of the push for that? Like, how do you do all of that at once, and what's your philosophy on that? Like, you guys do some of the most innovative things and still have some of the most crushable, like, consistent core brands. How do you approach that philosophically?
Fast following, just fake it till you make it. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I think a lot of it, like, again, if I rolled the clocks back a ways, most of it was just working on recipes on beers that we loved, that we thought other people would love, and innovation R&D was very much just myself and a couple of the brewers on staff working on recipes and then presenting them. And it was really a simple process. I think now you're constantly trying to keep your core portfolio tuned up, like we talked about earlier, and trying to keep it relevant. And at least in this organization, we've actually become a little more structured in that We have, a couple key players who are just focused on R&D. Hopefully this answers your question. And we installed a small brew house recently, this 10 hectoliter system down in LA we call the Propagator. So that gave us an opportunity to start brewing small batch, because prior to that, our trial batches were, the smallest brew house we had was 50 barrels. So you weren't really able to take the kind of risks you might want to take on a smaller kit.
When did that Propagator come online?
I think we started brewing there about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And it was a slow burn. It took us a while. And right now we have Sam Tierney, who is a 10-year veteran of our program, brewing down there. So he's both an excellent brewer, but he's also just an, insatiably curious beer geek as well. So, he's always kind of pushing us and the R&D team to innovate and to do things new. And he's also right there in Southern California, so he's kind of at the tip of the spear of what's going on down there. But it's funny that after we got the 10 hectoliter system going, we're like, oh, well, that's even kind of big for some of the really experimental things we want to do. So we commissioned 8 1 hectoliter fermenters here in Paso. And we don't really have a teeny brew house paired with it per se, but it allows us to take wort off of any production run. We can, somewhat manipulate it, ferment it with a different yeast, or do whatever we need to do at that small scale. But what has become really powerful for us is new hop products and new dry hop combinations, and we can split the same wort or the same beer into 8 tanks and dry hop, or give it 8 different hop treatments. Basically pull a 20-liter keg or so off of that, get it through sensory, and get some real data generated relatively quickly. So, to answer your question, it's just constantly grinding on, innovation and trying to push a little bit, and also, keeping our ears open to what our sales team and marketing team is looking for. That might not always be in perfect alignment with what the brewers want to do,
but
it will push
us
There's
supposed to be some
out of our comfort zone into trying some new things on the innovation side.
And also, you spent a lot of time in New Zealand, right? And you spent a lot of time kind of just getting familiar with the varietals down there and speaking to everybody on the South Island. You take that back to the Propagator, and is that where you're testing out, Nectarons and Brawakas and all those type of New Zealand hops?
Yeah, but actually we get probably more of that work done on these little, we call them affectionately our little MFers, our little mini fermenters here in Paso, because we can do a lot of work. Like if somebody has an experimental hop that they can only issue us a pound or 2 to work with, we can actually make a beer on that small scale and make a pretty good beer. So yeah, specific to New Zealand and Australia, the Southern Hemisphere hops, I always felt I was a little late to the game. I was tasting beers made by the likes of Alpine in Southern California, or some of the beers made by Garage Project in New Zealand, or some of these other New Zealand brewers, and thinking I was a little behind on that. And then I did some quick catch up, and it was fortunate enough to take a couple trips down there and get to know some growers. In fact, I just booked my trip for harvest starts in March here, and I'm going to get down there the 3rd week or so in March and spend a couple weeks in the Southern Hemisphere hunting hops.
Nice.
Love it.
Very cool. So with you were talking about just hops generally, but you were also mentioning kind of off air, Matt, that there's an oversupply currently going in hops as well. Maybe we should talk a little bit about that. I'm kind of interested in that, but now that I think about it, also my glass is empty, so maybe that might be a cliffhanger. Can we take a 5-minute break or something and come back and talk about that a little bit?
Sounds great.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, we'll come back in a few. And we're back with Beer Temple Podcast. I'm Chris Quinn. I'm joined by my co-host Mike Shalal and our guests Jude LaRose. What did you know? You didn't know I was going to get your name right?
No, he didn't.
It didn't sound like you were about to miss it. No. Jude something.
I know your name.
And Matt Brynildson.
Yes. And I will say it's a sign of the times. I brought some bottles here that Sam from the shop picked out, and I'm looking everywhere for a bottle opener. I was like, it's a tap room. There'll be a bottle opener. Sign of the times.
Not a bottle in this place.
There's not a bottle at Hop Butcher.
I wish you asked me.
I did.
I specifically brought a bottle opener from home today.
Oh,
it's in my pocket.
I just think it's funny that you're across the way. Yeah. But I just think it's funny that you go to breweries nowadays and like bottle opener. Why? Well, why? What do you need?
To open cans faster?
Exactly. So anyway, I think we were talking about how craft is driving the sale of hops and hop technology and R&D at this point. But you had also mentioned, Matt, an oversupply currently in the hop market, which I don't think I was aware of. I'm guessing you two, Mike and Jude, were. Jude, what's your last name again?
LaRose.
Oh, that's right. But if you guys could talk about it. Oh, is that
you
what that
looked
means?
at me like...
Yeah. What's your name? Yeah.
I felt it too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, what's the deal with this thing, Jude? Whoever, or Matt, whatever you're.
I can take that one. I mean, it's not entirely a good or a bad thing when supply and demand are out of sync, and we all have to remember that there's really no other significant industry that utilizes hops, hop acids, or the essential oils that come from hops. I mean, it's really, 99% of the hops harvested around the world go into beer, or, they go into warehouses waiting to go into beer. And so it's not really easy for growers to stay in perfect sync with brewers. And we talk about the fact that, the best way to communicate between breweries and hop growers or hop merchants is to contract your hops, because that sends a direct signal out there into the world exactly what you need. But as a brewer, I also know that, my crystal ball is foggy, and as much as I'd like, Hopnosis to sell 50,000 barrels next year, and that's what the sales team is aiming for, I don't know for sure that we're going to get there, but I'm going to contract hops to back up that forecast. And sometimes you fall short, sometimes you exceed it. And that's, the ebb and flow of the beer world. And don't mention the fact that Mother Nature throws curveballs at farmers pretty much every year. We actually had a pretty low yield as typical hop harvests go, both in the United States and in Europe, and yet we're still in an oversupply situation. And the whole COVID situation the pandemic didn't really help that out either, because everybody, slowed down while the hops kept growing, right? So, historically, there's always this kind of ebb and flow of hop acres. A lot of the new cultivars, Mosaic, Citra, some of the hops we've been talking about are really high yielders. And that further kind of complicates the situation. But the long and the short of it is, and we already talked about the fact that craft has really fueled a lot of this growth. A lot of these farmers are in really good financial position. And even though they're facing the potential of having to take some acreage out here in the short term, they're financially viable and strong enough to kind of weather these kind of changes. But it's super capital intensive to plant a hop yard. The annual needs of that field are very high, very capital intensive. We're all well aware of inflation, everything else is going on with energy and everything like that. So it's a hard and bitter pill to swallow if you're a farmer who just planted a whole bunch of hops for the craft industry, and now you're being told that you need to pull some percentage of that back out. Planting corn under trellis isn't exactly what these farmers want to do. But, so in the short term, it's a good thing for brewers because there's plenty of hops out there and most of the varieties that you want to brew with. But it's not exactly the balance in the system that we want to see. And so it sounds like a little bit of acreage has to come out. And we're really hoping hoppy beer continues to grow. We kind of had a little hiccup here post pandemic in terms of beer consumption. I can only speak for my brewery, but all of our points of distribution are back up and running, but the total volume through those points of distribution still hasn't completely caught up to, say, 2019. We make a lot of hoppy beer and we consume a lot of hops, but we have the capacity to do even more if the market allows.
So if like a large brewery of like the size like a Firestone Walker or like a Sierra Nevada, I don't know how much of like on a razor's edge that these hop growers are kind of producing based on spec or what's being contracted. But if they make a change to one of their core year-round hoppy beers and maybe make a different new hoppy beer, can that like throw the market into flux, or are those the kind of things? Is it that volatile where if one or two breweries, like kind of a perfect storm thing where they kind of change their needs, is that where we kind of come into some of these issues with supply?
I think most of it's speculation based on growth in previous years. We were just seeing these double-digit growths in hoppy style beers, and pretty much everybody that was making craft beer was growing out of their pants there for a while. And you got to remember, it's like it's a giant ship that
right.
You can only turn the wheel so much, and so. I mean, if you want to bring breeding into the conversation, most of the new cultivars that, are available today started in somebody's, greenhouse, in a breeder's greenhouse more than a decade ago. And it took that long to get them to commercial viability. And, meanwhile, the grower had to put up the trellises, find the land, put up the trellises, plant the rootstock, wait a couple of years for it to come into its full yield capacity before they were ready to, fully engage with the market. And then, Sabro is a perfect example. There's a couple other cultivars out there where, brewers' initial response was, wow, that's different. I can make some new beers. Plants went into the ground. Roll the clocks forward a couple years, and brewers are like,
right.
maybe not 100% Sabro beer.
Right.
Or maybe I over-contracted because I can't really find a place to sell these beers or make these kind of beers. And the growers are just forced to adjust.
That's kind of what I meant, was if they were thinking, like, this is going to be our new year-round beer. It's going to be super heavy on Sabro. We're going to do, I don't know, how far out do you guys contract? Would you do like a 5-year contract? And then, 2 years in, you're like, yeah, about that 5-year contract.
Everybody's got a little different program, but it's not uncommon to contract, say, 2 or 3 years out on a new cultivar. And,
okay.
and that's sending our signal and our money to support a new cultivar. It might take us a couple of years to figure out if that's really going to work. So the brewery's taken on some liability and the fact that we've got hops in a warehouse. The grower certainly has, because they put them in the ground, and then we got to kind of work together to say, what, if I forecast out another 2 to 3 years, I am not going to be using that much of this hop. So, let's contract a different variety. Let's pull that out, put something else in. And, yeah. So, this is where I'll throw a little like plug out there for Hop Quality Group. Although we have nothing to do at the merchant level or, volume or any of that type of thing, we've really been working hard as a group. And this is a small group of craft brewers, about 60 craft brewers in the group right now. We would love to grow that to more. And our main mission, to be quite honest with you, is to open the doors of communication with growers and merchants to make sure not only are we talking about the varieties that are important to brewers, but then, what kind of food safe practices do craft brewers require, because we use so much of the hops in late additions and dry hopping.
Interesting.
What kind of kilning works best for craft brewers. So it's really just this. It started out as really just trying to open communication up with growers and merchants, and I feel like although those lines of communication originally opened up for quality purposes and food safety purposes and those types of, directives, it's also really opened up just general communications between brewers and growers, and hopefully that continues forward. I think what happened, pandemic times, were that suddenly there were a lot of hops in the spot market, and a lot of small brewers decided, oh, I don't have to contract and lay my
I've
cards
been hearing
down.
that,
I can just buy off the spot market, and I'm protected. There's low risk. Well, then suddenly you put the blinders on everybody on the merchant and grower side, because they don't really know what you're going to buy until you buy it, and it takes years of preparation to get there. So if there's brewers out there listening, even if you're a small brewer, you should contract in advance. And the message to brokers then is to be as flexible as possible to adjust those contracts moving forward. That's really how the game works best.
So in a case like this year where this last harvest where yield was lower in America and yield was lower in Germany and in the Czech Republic than it was the year before, is that where they come out and they say, we're able to, yield is low, we're able to fulfill our current contracts, good thing that there's an oversupply with people's contracts because they can continue to draw that down, but what that means is that there's nothing available on the spot market this year?
It's very variety specific. Like, Saaz, you mentioned Europe. Saaz, there's, virtually nothing out there right now in the spot market because contracts weren't fulfilled. And there are certain German varieties that's the same. But on the whole, in terms of kilograms alpha required worldwide and U.S. aroma varieties required by the craft industry, there's an overage. So despite our low yields, we're still seeing more hops in the warehouses than we need going forward. Is it an awful thing or something that's good? No, I think, like I said earlier, I think that the growers are in a good position. They can't stay in this position for an extended period of time, or prices will start dropping, or hops will sit in warehouses too long. Let's just say that. But if you're brewing Pilsner beer with Saaz, it's hard to get Saaz right now unless you have a contract.
Okay, interesting. So there you go. You got your super Saaz, your double Saaz going there, Jude.
Stan Hieronymus wrote a cool article in the Craft Beer and Brewing, one of the most recent, I don't know if it was an industry, all industry subscription, or if it was the regular issue that they release every so often. But it was basically this is not Saaz. You're not going to get Saaz this year. So here are the 5 varieties that you should use if you want to start brewing a Saaz-like beer.
Well, actually, it's these odd years where growing yields in certain regions were off, but yet there's other hops available. Back to innovation, where at least, in our brewery, we found a lot of really cool solutions that tend to stick. One example was, our DBA, which is probably closest to Goose Island's original Honker Ale in terms of it being kind of a British pale ale / English bitter recipe with a lot of either continental or UK hops. And there are certain years where you just couldn't get good East Kent Goldings or Fuggles, and we were forced to go out and try to source other varieties that were close to those varieties. And that's where we started using hops like Styrian Goldings as Fuggle and East Kent Golding replacements, even U.S. grown Willamette. And then it even led us to German tradition. So there's a whole hops in and around this somewhat noble or landrace variety type that actually work really well in those styles of beers.
I don't know if it's acreage devoted or if it's yield, but I was surprised that how little middle fruit and tetning there is compared to, I think, something like Tradition or Liberty.
And that's a case where now the grower is starting to realize a cultivar like Tradition yields really well. And if I have that planted, I can count on a pretty robust yield year in and year out. Middle fruit is a really low yielder. Tetnang's kind of somewhere in the middle, but it's a really low alpha yielder. And so if given the choice, and again, brewers aren't speaking through their contracts, growers will migrate to tried and true newer cultivars that are higher yielders. So again, the big shift, it's funny, is like the big shift in Hallertau Mittelfrüh is when Sam Adams Boston Lager started to decline and they moved away from their Hallertau Mittelfrüh contracts. And there was a short moment in time there where the plants were still in the field. So if you wanted some, you had your pick of the litter, but slowly over time, those hops were taken out and new cultivars like Polaris for high alpha or Tradition for, utility brewing were put in its place.
So is that where kind of like the future of hops are going, where we're going to start looking at hops that either like that are being developed right now or that we currently have, that we're going to start not looking for the next big thing, but hops that are, ergonomically, that we got good yield, they're disease resistant, they could deal with climate change. We don't have to worry about all of these, everything that's happened to hops in the last couple of years as far as the weather has gone, where we're going to start prizing just hops that deal with, just the changing world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this if you visit any of the breeders in Yakima or in any region around the world, that first and foremost, it has to be agronomically viable. It's got to be pest resistant. Now it needs to be drought resistant and heat resistant. And it needs to be a high yielder if it's even going to make it, onto the game floor. And that's why a lot of the land race varieties are starting to get really pinched. It's just not profitable to grow those unless a brewer, again, signs a contract and wants to pay a higher rate for a lower yielding hop and take the hit every 2 or 3 years, depending on how Mother Nature. You guys probably know this already, but maybe not all the listeners know that in Germany, less than 50% of the crop is under irrigation. So it really gets hit hard in these drought years and yields real off. Whereas in Yakima, 100% of the crop is under irrigation. You can't grow anything in Yakima unless it's irrigated. And that's true through a lot of hop growing regions throughout continental Europe. So you really see year to year variation. And, with climate change, you're seeing more impact. And you'll probably see a more rapid replacement of landrace varieties with new heat resistant strains. What's interesting is, some of the German flavor hops like Mandarina Bavaria, Hull Melon, Hallertau Blanc were all bred with Cascade as one of the genetic donors. And Cascade, because it came from the Pacific Northwest, is more heat and drought tolerant. So those hops are doing better in at least the more recent years than some of the older varieties that were grown traditionally in Europe.
So is that how should we expect to see maybe some of these classic hops dwindling or going away as there are hardier replacements that are matching a similar flavor or alpha profile or something?
Or some of these older hops are hardier.
Sure.
Maybe you go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you're definitely going to see some shifts as a result of, more pressure from climate related issues.
Interesting. So if it's okay, I want to take a little bit of a right turn and ask Matt a couple questions that are, I just had some questions for you, Matt, if that's okay. Now's the gotcha moment. All right, I wait till the very end. Can't wait.
Will you send a keg of Pale 31 to Beer Temple
Yes.
so I can drink it?
Right, exactly.
Hey, we're going to brew some Pale 31 in 2023. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk about that, but that's going to happen.
All right, we got him.
I mean, that is one of the directions I was going to ask. I mean, it is... Whoops. Yeah, I got too excited. No, I was just like, I'm sure that you have, that you have an affinity for all the beers that you guys brew and the ones that you develop. And I'm sure there's some that you love more than others. But I know, I do think for Firestone Walker in particular, there are some that, like, when they go away, and I will say to their credit, often they do come back. Yeah. Are just like crushing. Is there any beer that you were just sad to see go away?
Well, I mean, obviously Pale 31 you mentioned. I mean, that was the very first recipe I developed for Firestone Walker. So when I came on board, Firestone had already been in existence for 5 years. They're at about 9,000 barrels a year, and the flagship and best-selling beer by a long shot was Double Barrel Ale.
Okay.
the rest of the portfolio consisted of a beer called Windsor Pale Ale and another one called Firestone Lager. And Windsor Pale Ale was really a very English, even lighter than DBA type beer, English Pale Ale. And so Adam Firestone and David Walker, when I first came on board, my first project was to reformulate Windsor Pale Ale into something that was a little more, West Coast, dry hopped. And, you maybe have heard the story before, but of course I came from the Midwest and I had seen the genesis of Two Hearted and I knew how that beer was made. So you can only guess the hop that I employed for Pale 31. It was dry hop with Centennial.
Nice.
And I always thought of it as a little mini Two Hearted kind of thing. Single Hearted. I don't know what you want to call it.
Yeah, I love it.
That was a foundational beer for me in my entry into craft beer. That was what I drank the most of when I started.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just I would agree. I mean, to me, it was
I remember when it first came.
I was heartbroken when it went away. But again, it's all these things like, well, if you liked it so much, you probably should have gotten it more.
I was not the problem. I was not the problem.
Yeah, right.
You're not the problem.
Yeah.
Everyone else was the problem.
Sometimes you just make these decisions, and Pale 31 kind of went away and made room for Easy Jack,
Right.
which
Right,
we called a session IPA.
Also great.
Quite honestly, it's a pale ale, on paper, call it what you will. And that employed some new hop varieties and was a little more progressive. But anyway, and now that beer's gone away too, so I shed a tear for Easy Jack.
Yeah, exactly.
Rest in power, Easy
Yeah,
Jack.
as long as Pivo's back in 6-pack, so as long as we have that, I would say.
We're all good.
Yeah. So I guess maybe I should let me keep with these weird little
Go.
questions. Yeah. Okay. So in the it doesn't really matter category, would you consider a
high stakes,
Pivo?
very high stakes?
No, it does
That's
matter.
a great lead-in. I don't know
It
what
does
you're gonna
matter.
say next.
But I'm just saying, these are the stupid things that
It doesn't
idiots like
matter.
me
Keep Chris up at night.
and you, and Jude.
This is
This
great.
is the sort of stuff that
LaRose.
you and I talk about.
Sure, right.
Yes.
This is what we
I'm just
talk
going to
about
call you
after the
LaRose. Do you consider Pivo to be an Italian Pilsner?
Yeah.
You do?
Yes,
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Got it.
And now, would I have said that when it was conceived? Maybe not.
Okay.
I think that was something that that style kind of came into focus. Maybe even after Pivo had originally been launched. I don't keep really close track of those things, but I now think it's firmly in that Italian Pilsner style for sure.
I mean,
I
would
think
say
Pivo, as much as Tipo at this point, defined that style and put that style on the map.
I think Pivo more than Tipo is to thank, even though the Tipo as it goes is the reason for Pivo. But I mean, it was just
Tipo was that life-changing beer I had, and I had to come home and design a beer like it. And probably the biggest compliment I've ever been paid as a brewer was when Agostino told me that he changed the Tipo recipe to include Saphir after he tasted it.
Wow.
So it was like,
That's awesome.
I was like,
it's amazing. Okay. All right, so mark one down against me in my side of the argument. So Pivo is an Italian Pils. Okay, there we go.
4 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, you brought Tipo over in cans. The last couple of times it's been available in bottles, right?
Yeah.
That one time you brought over in cans, it was special.
Yeah.
We were making Italian-style Pils for the very first time. You guys classically on the back, I don't know if it's I don't think it's on the current Pivo boxes, but at one point, it kind of highlighted the 3 or 4 areas that you were pulling inspiration from when we brewed our first Italian-style Pils. First off,
well, and when Pivo, again, this is ancient history, but when it was first put out, it won GABF Gold 3 years in a row for German Pils.
Oh, we talk about that here on this show.
Nobody else was making German Pils, and now it can't win a beer. It won't win in that category. It would have to be entered as I don't know what the category would be exactly, but under Italian Pils. I don't think there's an actual Italian Pils category, but there's basically an Americanized Pilsner.
It's the Pivo Pils category then.
I mean, I do think that
the memorial category.
We joke that it should be
the
the honor, like an honorarium. It should be the Pivo.
They give out 2 golds, whatever
award.
won this year, and also Pivo.
Or just like it's called like, like the Walter Payton Award every year, so it should be the Pivo. Yep. If you win a certain amount of times, you're no longer eligible, but that category of the award is named after you.
They just put it up they put a can of it
Wouldn't
up in the rafters.
Yeah, so like Allagash White, the Allagash White Award for Belgian. Yeah, right.
Yeah, Allagash would be
right.
the white guy.
It sounds like the NBA, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get your beer gets retired and it's named after you. Yeah.
They raise it up to the rafters.
Yeah.
During the
but
ceremony.
like first 3 years, just going back to back to back, it was amazing. So the beer was like 3 years old and
Jordan
had
style.
Never not won a gold Pivo. We would talk about how
so you had to retire it at that point, right? That's where it's like,
so here's where we get the fanboy. Here's where the Chris Farley show comes in. Remember when the first 3 years you won gold? That was awesome.
There was a time we were pouring at Uppers and Downers at Talia Hall, and I forgot who was next to me, but he just had like 2 cases of Pivo and just started handing them out to people.
Oh, it was such an industry beer.
Like, here you go.
Yeah. Another time, it was another me and John Lafler story. We were sitting there drinking Pivo, and it was, I think, the first time it had come in. We were sitting at Northdown, and it was that Saphir. It was like so like perfumey. I had never.
It's in Rev Pills too. It's great.
Amazing.
It's such a cool hop.
It's so cool.
I first tasted it in a Kolsch made by a craft brewer in Germany, and was really blown away by it because I feel like it still has a noble character, but just enough lemongrass and like you said, some kind of unique character that it really stands apart. So it's a really cool hop.
Yeah, that and Grüngeist are the 2 hops we use the most of.
Grüngeist was great too.
Grüngeist is my favorite of all time.
Here's the part of the show where I embarrass myself a little bit because I was thinking about, now I've mentioned John Lafler. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the next part. I'm sorry. Did I forget that before? This is the next part.
This is another part where.
Yeah.
If you already did, does this count as
right? No, it's going to be the Chris Quinn honorary time where he embarrasses himself.
So you only have to do that once to get the award here?
So I think I freaked out Matt a little bit one time when John Lafler at Northdown, which is what made me think about it, introduced me because he's like, "Oh, Matt Brynildson's here," and he knew I was a bordering on unhealthy enthusiast, and he was like, "Hey, this is Matt Brynildson," and I was like, "Oh," and I went on like maybe like a 30-second, 1-minute monologue. Very self-indulgent in a way about like how much like the beers that you make meant to me and how like awesome I thought they were and this and that. And I think at the end I like walked. Yeah, I was like, "This is awesome. You're awesome." It was totally Farley. And I think John at some point had to like lean in and be like, "No, he's okay. It's okay. It's okay." Because you like, didn't know what to do because there really was nothing to do. It was like I said, a monologue of me just being weird, but. That was.
Is there
just
a story
funny
here?
moment. Yeah. No, that was awesome.
Is there a question?
There is a story. There's no question.
Genuinely, that was awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome. No, that was just me. I thought people might appreciate listening. To me embarrassing myself, fanboying, which I don't do very often.
I love you, Chris. That was excellent.
You don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a beer temple. That is a beer temple Hall of Fame moment.
Yes. Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. Right. And Lafler was like, he's okay. It's okay. So I still remember that moment. Yeah, it was cool. It was like, oh wow, this is the guy who makes the beer that I talk about all the time. Yeah. How great it is.
So new hop varieties.
Yeah. Right. But no, I do have one more. I have
one more anecdote.
Question. No. This is
I
a
just
question.
wanted to have a nice segue for you.
No,
but
good.
you already have one, so keep going.
I have another question.
No,
I'm just
great.
going to keep
I'm
going.
Here.
Then I'm going to throw it to you, Jude.
No, I don't know. I'm entertained.
A little birdie told me, Matt, that Hopnosis uses lager yeast. Is that true or is that bogus?
It is true.
Okay.
And then it would be interesting to get Jude's, how strictly defined is cold IPA.
There we go. That's where I was going. Yeah.
If you ferment a IPA, grist bill, and you're shooting for a really dry beer, can you still call it a cold IPA, whether or not it has adjunct or not? And I think when we launched Hopnosis, we didn't really even want to get into that conversation because we were just trying to make a great IPA and we're using lager yeast to do it. But the more I brew it, we definitely have a different fermentation profile, a little different approach, trying to make a drier beer. There's a lot of things about Hopnosis that we're doing different than we do with a normal IPA. So I'm starting to swing back to this idea that, yes, indeed, it is a different type of beer. And I'd love to be able to refer to it as a cold IPA.
Why is that? Why would you love to do that? Just
to differentiate it from the rest of our portfolio. I think, it's much different than Union Jack. It's much different than pretty much anything we make with ale yeast, but I don't know. I don't know what you guys think about that.
It's a frequent topic on the show.
Yeah, it is.
You can do whatever you want. But,
Well, I think that's what's great because the best thing is when you say, we ferment a lot of our hoppy beers with lager yeast, and then no one's any wiser, and you say, but you couldn't tell the difference. I forget. I remember I heard you say, we just didn't tell anybody, right? But then all the cold IPA detractors, if they knew that from the beginning, what would they say? Was it you or who else was it that said it might have been? Who was it? Somebody that just basically that said like all of our hoppy, or no, Highland Park. I think Highland Park says all of our. Yep. Yeah, all of our West Coast IPAs.
All of his West Coast with lager yeast. And I'd be lying if I didn't say we were influenced by that because I love Highland Park's beers. And I really, in particular, liked what lager yeast was doing with those beers. I think when you not to get too geeky, but when you control that fermentation just perfectly, the little bit of sulfitic character that carries over from the lager yeast can add and elevate a little bit of the dank side of the hops,
sure,
and not overpower the other beautiful characteristics of the hops. And so we've really geeked out on trying to really fine tune that process. And Sam at the Propagator has been brewing all sorts of really cool beers with, hoppy beers with lager yeast. But I guess the $1 million question is, are they just IPAs? Or
yes. That's the $1 million
question. Cold IPAs. I don't know.
I think Kevin Davey with Wayfinder always did a great job of basically just saying, who gives a shit? You know, we're not going to spend more than a minute.
That's kind of my opinion.
Yeah, we're not going to spend a minute, more than a minute talking about it. We, in 2019, he was really cool. We wanted to brew. We drank a lot of Pivo. We wanted to drink Tipo. And we hadn't had Lupolo by Oxbow yet, but we wanted to make Italian-style pills. And we shot Kevin an email through an info box through Wayfinder's website, and he just said, "Give me a phone call, and I'll tell you exactly what I do." We were interested in Italian-style pills, so when we flew into Portland in fall of 2019 to select some strata and then drive up to Yakima, which is a nice 3.5-hour drive. I wouldn't recommend it. Well, you have to do it one or two times, and then you do it a couple of times and say, we're going to do this differently. So we spent some time in Portland, and we went to Wayfinder because we heard they had an Italian-style pills. As we drank down the menu, they had cold IPA, and we said, what is cold IPA? Our head brewer, Justin Miller, was like, what is cold IPA? And they said, it's with lager yeast. He had beef with it for a while, but we got over it in a quick second, and it was awesome. We came home, and we brewed one. But what we did too, and so cold IPA, I think if Wayfinder recommended from a style standpoint, they would ferment with 3470, the Weihenstephaner yeast, and they would build in some flaked rice or rice syrups. We always, and they also ferment that warmer, I think at 65. We didn't ask too many questions. We just did what we thought we would do. We ended up doing with Augustiner yeast, still only at 56 or 57. They net out similarly, but the beer.
Which beer was this?
So another cool story too. The very first time we did it, Mike was on a saison round table at your place with Afterthought and Avery from Keeping Together. And Avery was talking about a Jester King beer and their process. And she says during the deep rinse, this is what we do. And we go, and she starts telling the story later when we're having beers at the beer temple. I go, Avery, I was like, what is the deep rinse? I was like, is this the new way we're talking about sparging? Is this what we're talking about, the deep rinse? And she goes, no, I was talking about Le Petit Prince. And I was like, oh. So we named our first cold IPA Le Petit Prince. Did it a totally different way. The beer is so rad though. it produces a crystalline hop character.
You call it a deep rinse.
We called it deep rinse.
Okay.
Because we thought that's what thought Avery was talking about, mashing in or sparging
that
as
rocks.
the deep rinse. And there's a petite rinse.
There's so much meaning in that.
Yeah, and then it brings up in my head. It's like
Great.
there's a number of different ways to get to the same finish line, and I think if you looked at the specs of our beer, OG and finishing gravity, it's right in line with cold IPA. So we mash in such a way, and you could even use enzymes to get to a drier finish point if you needed to. So again, I don't want to be the person who dictates what is and what isn't, but do you need adjunct to get to the same endpoint? I don't know.
When you say adjunct,
what do you mean call it
enzyme?
then?
No, corn or rice.
Oh. Okay.
So-
Is there adjunct in Hopnosis or?
No, it's an all malt recipe.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing is that ale, lager yeast was the main
So
main crux of it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what's great
Either
too,
way,
is because
it
that's
don't
what but that and West Coast Pilsner and West Coast IPA that's using a lot more Pilsner malt and lighter Pilsner malts and removal of caramel malt and the use of new hop products, the use of new hop varietals, the use of things that we've learned in the taking everything that we know the last several years, things we know the last year, things we know 10 years ago, and applying to what we're doing now. And West Coast style IPA is turned into a brand new thing.
Oh, brand new,
It's all been
and a
driven on the
different
West
thing.
Coast. Yeah,
And
totally.
a different thing.
Yep.
So that's another question. I mean, is it time to? I mean, because there's nothing that we love more in craft beer than a new style name. So
modern West Coast IPA.
or go back and call like something for the old school ones. I don't know.
Central
Growing up
Coast
in
IPA.
Caramel IPA?
Well,
Is that what you wanna call it?
When I was in Philly, we wouldn't call them
Oxidized
West
BA.
Coast IPAs. We would call them San Diego
Is that a
style
city in
IPAs because we
Pennsylvania?
didn't know what it was. So we would say San Diego, those San Diego IPAs.
Right.
We would call them. So I don't know. I think San Diego style sounds good
But I
for a
think-
retro West Coast,
And
like
that's
that
all-
Pizza Port style.
And that's awesome. And we should have something that calls that out and what calls this out, because both are great.
It is different
Yeah.
because West Coast, the modern West Coast is
different.
different.
Totally
Yeah,
different.
But does it matter? I guess because you know what? If someone would say East Coast now, they would think of like a hazy, and East Coast used to be a more
It matters for
malt
how much
balance.
time
English
somebody
style.
has
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how many beers they've had and how much time they just want to.
I mean, it all matters
Have fun
exactly as
talking.
much as the is Pivo and Italian Pills question. It doesn't really matter, but we're sitting here drinking beer. Might
They're
as
fun.
well.
They're fun amongst us. I agree.
Exactly. Right. Awesome. All right. I think we've talked about hops quite a bit. Jude, is there anything
yeah.
else that you would like to
Oh, this was
to
fun.
discuss? Okay. Matt, is there anything else you would like to discuss?
No, this was great, and it just makes me want to spend more time in your part of the world in Chicago. I had a fortuitous layover just before New Year's where our plane was delayed a day in transit over to Europe, so I got to spend a little bit of time at Peace.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
Eating some great pizza pie and trying some of Kyle's new beers, and then went over to Revolution and broke bread with Josh Deeth at Revolution. Didn't get to see Mr. Seebeck on that particular, but it did spark a I think I can talk about it. We're going to work on a collaboration with Rev this year. More than likely barrel aged, so it won't come out for some time. But
cool.
but
They
that's in
barrel
the
age
work.
beer?
I've heard that they do. What was the last beer that you guys? Well, not the last. Maybe it was a bomber. It was an IPA. It was like a bear on one side. No, what was it?
Los Osos or Dos Osos.
Yes, Dos Osos. Man, that was a good beer. That was a great beer. That beer was awesome. Remember that beer? That was. You said you were going to be that guy, and here I am.
I had no idea. I was trying to
I do have a
Abe
question.
Lincoln it and
Yeah.
not sound like an idiot.
If this isn't your favorite hop, correct me. Why is Cluster your favorite hop?
It's not my favorite.
It's not Cluster. You were, do, have
What
you ever
made you?
said that
What
in
made
joke?
you ask?
I swear, have you ever made a joke that Cluster is your favorite hop?
No, maybe I said Cashmere was my favorite hop at one point.
Totally Cashmere rocks.
We got Cluster.
Basically the same as Cluster. Yeah.
Forget about it.
California Cluster.
Serge, edit that one out.
No, that's staying in.
It's really embarrassing.
I'm going to edit it right back in when Jude.
It's another C hop.
Oh, there you go.
We got it on board.
Keep it in.
Yeah. All right then. Well, yeah, it'd be great to have you back in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Your old stamp.
When that
ground.
Pale 31 comes out and you send a fresh
he's
keg to
delivering
Beer
it.
Temple,
We'll be hand delivering it.
Then you, me, and Rob Salvatore go to Mirabelle. Have a nice little Italian dinner.
Can't wait.
Oh, I have a quick question. I know we're ending, but do you guys still have the Union up going at Firestone Walker?
We do. So every batch of DBA, a portion of it goes through the Union fermentation. We don't brew as much DBA as we would love to, or we did back in the day. And in fact, here in the next month or two, the Union is going to its new home. We built out a new kind of barrel processing or barrel filling and emptying area, Union fermentation area, and new kind of aging cellar for our barrel program here in Paso Robles. So, barrels are still a huge part, and wood's a huge part of our DNA as a brewery. And yes, to answer your question, DBA is still fermented in medium toast, American oak, every batch.
Nice. I was at Marston's, and we were taking a tour, and the tour guide was, a woman who'd been giving the tours for, decades. And we mentioned DBA, and she remembered you guys coming around, and she thought you guys were crazy, and going to the brewers and talking to them about the Union system and stuff like that. But she remembered you guys. Didn't know the brewery, but we brought a couple cans, or maybe it was bottles at the time, of DBA, and gave one to her, and she's like, "Oh, great! I'll give it to my husband."
wow.
I think she said, and we gave it to some of the brewers, and we were handing it to them, and the brewers thought it was pretty cool. One of them pulled Union beer, like 100, because they only use, I think, 10% or something like that in Pride. And he pulled us some of the 100%, uncut stuff for us to take home. So we have awesome. DBA to thank for that. I just remembered that. So sweet, very cool.
I love that beer.
Yeah, it's great beer. Cool. I think that about does it. Thanks to my guests, Matt Brynildson and Jude.
I forgot.
Some sort of flower. Anyway. Thanks.
Burgundy?
yeah, Jude. Yeah, exactly.
Jude Tulip.
Yeah.
Good times, Matt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being out.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys, and it's great. It's a real treat to talk with you, and hopefully next time we see each other in person.
Right on.
With some fresh beers at either your place or mine. And thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for making the time.
Thanks a lot. All right, see you guys.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard